Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast, the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education. The goal is to provide meaningful conversation to what is currently happening in our classrooms. Stories, pains, moments of success. We want to hear it all. Friends, thank you. And here we are with another episode of Under the Hat. I just want to throw out and give that shout out to all of you who have been subscribing, that have been sending me DMs, different levels of gratitude, thanks, encouragement. And so here we are in January. And so to me, every year, I get this feeling like January is like the longest month, but the shortest month all in the same time. I feel like, man, like we are still in this month because so much has happened with this show, with my own journey as an educator, as a trainer, as a speaker. And so it's been a lot of fun. Just know, friends, that next week I'm taking a week off for a little bit of work travel. I'm going to be in the South working and collaborating with the company that I work for. But when we come back, I believe so mark your calendars, February 7th. For the first time on the show, we're jamming out 3 episodes in that week. Super pumped, super excited. Going to hear a lot of different stories, different resources, different ways that we could be leveling up our classrooms and maybe our school districts if you're in the leadership or instructional coach realm. But exciting times. But this episode, I think you're going to be in for a real treat. Because we are joined here by Debbie Tannenbaum. And so Debbie and I have not known each other too long, but the moment I've met Debbie, like the first time we met, I'm like, wow, a fountain of information and wisdom. Like I just got that from you, Debbie.
Wow.
So
thank you.
Welcome. How are you this evening?
Great. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And so this show's been a big treat for me. And for me personally, like I just enjoy the learning myself, like just hearing from individuals like yourself that have done a whole lot in education. And folks, like just if you're listening, whether it's right now or sometime in the future, I'm looking at Debbie's bio, her resume, kind of like what she's done. A true leader here, ISTE certified. And we'll be diving into that because that's my own personal curiosity. Because I love the ISTE standards. I use them in the classroom. I still do with my adult learners. But we'll dive into that. Really involved in leadership with ISTE, which is insanely impressive. Author, blogger, speaker. But Debbie, I don't want to take any time from you. If you can maybe just for those that are listening that have not met you before, what's your context? How did you get into education? What's your current work? And where do you see yourself going?
So I've always wanted to be an educator. It's just something I've always wanted to do. Originally, I wanted to be an elementary school French teacher, but that's not what I was meant to do. And it turned out classroom management in French was really hard. And my first year of teaching, I fell in love with technology and how all of the opportunities that it could offer my students. And I just would see them doing things that I could have never imagined. And so from there, I decided to get my master's in technology. And it seems hard to believe because my son is almost 22 and he was a baby when I got my master's. But I'm still in the game. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. And especially the last 5 or 6 years have been years of tremendous growth for me when I became a connected educator. Since becoming a connected educator, I started blogging. That led to me writing, this year, my one word is actually author. So my plan is for you to see a lot of writing from me. But I became a tech coach 6 years ago in my county. And I just love working with educators and helping them to see ways that technology can amplify learning. It's something, if you had asked me, 10 years ago, I would have said you were crazy. I would never do. But I just love doing this. And as much as I love working with kids, really helping teachers with their students is really my passion. And I'm super lucky that I get to do that. I know you and I just talked a little bit about not being at FETC. I'm super excited to be at TCEA next week. But I get the opportunity to work in the school, still keeping fresh, but also to go to conferences. And the next 2 months are kind of busy with conferences. And I'm sharing the things that I love with educators who are ready to learn and try new things and also bring things back to my staff.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think when you talk about training teachers, showing teachers what's possible, it's kind of small thing. Oh, it's not a small thing, but what I love is when I see the eyes get large, when the light bulbs in the room are like, oh, wow, I didn't think about using a tech tool in this way. Or I think a lot of times, and Debbie, I'm sure you come across this, where teachers come into it with like almost using technology for logistical purposes and not
Hmm.
always transformative purposes, if that makes sense. And so
Well, and I
helping
think
them. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I just think it's hard with the pandemic, especially in an elementary setting. Um, in our district, they spent a lot of time going over what blended learning was with our middle and high schools. But elementary schools, especially in where I am, they were just kind of thrown in. And because of that, we really never took the time to build that knowledge. And I work with, educators K to 12, um, but the elementary kit educators, they have a special place in my heart because I don't feel like there's enough professional learning focused on their needs. And so that's been something I'm super passionate about because so many times you go to conferences and all they're talking about is things that are for middle and high school. And if we don't prepare our kids when they're younger, they're not going to be ready.
Yeah. And so that's an interesting point that I think of often in the sense of, with my company, uh, as a trainer, as someone that's leading professional learning on a regular basis, I get like this vibe, I guess, from elementary friends, elementary teachers, where they're like, the technology doesn't fit or it doesn't work with elementary, or we're really working on motor skills. I want them to be pen on paper. So I'm assuming you've encountered that. So what are your thoughts? How do you lean into that? What balance is there between what they're saying versus what perhaps students need right now at this moment?
Well, I think it's really important to really think about how you're using the technology. In our school district, our pre-K and our kindergartners have iPads, and then it's laptops, or it will be at some point Chromebooks, grades 1 and up. And it's really important to look at why you're using that technology. And to me, it isn't about we're going to use technology all the time. That doesn't make sense. But a lot of times I've found in my experience, there are certain requirements states and districts have for certain programs, adaptive programs like an ST Math or Alexia. So teachers are sometimes hesitant to put their kids on devices again because they feel like they've already had that screen time. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time talking to my teachers about is that we need to provide them opportunities that they wouldn't have without the tech. I really lean into universal design for learning, which is actually how you and I met because I'm doing a playground for ASCD in March. And talking about how technology can provide that universal design for learning, how it can give our kids access in ways that they wouldn't know otherwise. And that was all a really big part of becoming ISTE certified, was making that connection. But I try to explain to them, it's about how can we let our students learn in a little bit different way and building that engagement in and making sure that there's more than one way to share their learning. And when you do it with paper and pencil, you're not giving your students as many opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, everything you just said really resonates with me. But in the same time, for me personally, I came from the high school classroom and now I'm an adult ed. So like for me, I'm always curious to talk with individuals like yourself that have really been into that elementary space. And also like even now, like, being a father of somebody she's in first grade, my daughter Riley,
Mhm.
just seeing like how teachers have to navigate that space is insanely impressive. And I tip my hat to every elementary teacher, especially like K through third, because those are so like I'm realizing important years, right? In terms of like
Absolutely.
where they're headed. And so I'm in it here in this conversation to really learn as an educator, as a trainer, and even as a father, because these years are so critical. And
And
so
I was just going to say that last night we had a cookies and coding event at my school. And so we had our families coding with their children using Hour of Code puzzles. And I can't quite explain the magic you see when you see a parent and their young child coding together. And sometimes the parents getting more excited and the kids are like, yeah, we know how to do this. Um, but this is the second time we've held that event, and just watching the kids be able to show, because I think a lot of times parents don't understand what their kids are doing on the technology. And when a parent can understand, we're doing problem solving, we're creating things, we're showing, creating artifacts of learning, when we're doing those types of things and we're really showing it in practice, it's not just, it's not the same as saying, I'm putting you on YouTube and you're consuming.
mm, right, right, yeah. And well, and then the other thing is like what kids now are, I guess, consuming for like entertainment purposes, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so teaching those students how to, yeah, you can consume technology, but what does that mean? How do you do that safely? But then how do you produce the
Right.
technology too? Which is a big part of what we're going to talk about in a bit. Yeah, and so my friend Samantha here is in the chat.
Awesome.
Purposeful learning in creative play. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
So,
see she's going to be a TCEA. I have 3 sessions, Samantha. Come visit me.
oh yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna spread that word, Debbie, if you don't mind, because I think more people really need to see your magic. And that's just
Aw,
my own
thank
opinion.
you.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
And I'm doing
So
one of my sessions with Manny Curiel, so I'm going to see if I can keep up with his energy.
oh, okay. So Manny and I are friends. Hopefully he considers me a friend. But Manny's amazing and has a whole. You're right. Like his energy is on a different level.
It
That's
really
gonna be
is.
fun. Yeah, that's gonna be
Yeah, I'm
fun.
doing an ed puzzle session. I'm doing an hour and a half tech up the math session where I'm talking about Desmos and Flashcard Factory and Flip. And then I'm doing one on think routines. So I'm really excited. TCA is one of my favorite conferences. This is my third time attending it. So
Super jealous. Yeah. So being out in California, obviously, I'm at Q almost every year.
I've never been to
Uh,
Q in person though.
see, that's the thing. We're in these different regions, right, in this giant country. And but getting to these like the TCEAs and the Qs can be quite challenging. If you don't mind, Debbie, so before we really get into the content here, I do want to ask you and spend a little bit of time on ISTE certification, uh, because I know myself when I was in the high school classroom, I was like, man, I would love to get ISTE certified, but a little bit of intimidation, a little bit of understanding the why, maybe the
Mhm.
possible, like what the benefits, the outcome. I have a better understanding now that I'm more on
Mhm.
the ed tech
Yeah.
side. I kind of, see all the awesome things that ISTE does. So do you mind just taking a little bit of time talking about
No.
what that journey's like and maybe why someone and how someone would go about that?
Well, I can say to start off that it's the best professional learning experience I've ever had in my entire life. So that's pretty high praise. I do a lot of professional learning, and it was so high quality. It really changed. It took all of these things that I had been like gathering throughout my education journey, and it put it together in such a way that it all connected. And I was really lucky. I had an amazing instructor. I also won a NASA scholarship, so I didn't. It was free. Um, but it really challenged me to really be purposeful and intentional in how I use technology. It made me think about, how do I use technology as a leader? How do I use technology to connect to others? How am I using it for data? There's so many different ISTE standards. And in order to become ISTE certified, you have 25 things you have to do for your portfolio. And you have to show you've mastered at least 20 of them to get that designation. And it's hard. I'll be honest. I went and did like my course, and I think I finished in my course, because you do like 6 months of coursework. I think I finished in like May, and I had till August to turn my portfolio, and no problems during the course. But afterwards, when I started working on my portfolio, I got stuck in the learning pit, and I almost gave up a few times. But other ISTE certified educators who I knew, I connected with them at my state conference. They helped me out. They really helped me push through. And by doing this, I became such a much better educator. And I can say that without any doubt. I really am intentional in how I do use technology. I had learned about UDL probably like 15 years ago and hadn't really thought about it. But UDL is included in the ISTE standard. So it really made me look at UDL in a new way and really look at how I could hook. It also made me just look at everything I was doing and really think about, how is this helping our students reach these standards? So I can't give it enough high praise. It is hard, but it's so worthwhile. And if anybody's interested in learning more about it, I'm sure you'll have my email. I am happy to talk to anybody, because we have times where we get together every month and we share things. It's a network of educators who are just really passionate about this work. And, ASCD and ISTE are merged now. And I hope at some point that they'll find a way to merge those two things together, because I just think there's such magic in that. The whole child with the ASCD approach and the ISTE certified educator standards, they really work well together, because they're really about making sure we're providing the best possible education for our students.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. And I myself am still getting the courage to go and do it. I love the idea of really focusing in on the ISTE standards in that way. And while I've taught with the standards and I'm an advocate for
Right.
them, and I do my training, like that's part of it, right? But digging in deeper like that, I can see can just be a wonderful way to
It was
learn and really
so
take
good.
what you're doing to a new level, right? So yeah, so
Absolutely.
thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, cool. So at this time, so Debbie, you have such a wealth of knowledge on working with our youngest learners. And I have a
Mhm.
feeling that this question is really going to fit into that and how you're using creativity. But what is right now, whether it's good, bad, nuanced, positive, wherever you want to lean, doesn't have to be one thing, it can be several. But in your work, what you're doing, what is under your hat, so to speak, or what is top of mind in education at this current moment?
Well, the first thing that came to my head is I've been doing a lot of work talking about AI recently. I'm taking an ISTU course on AI. My district is having an AI innovators cohort, which I'm starting next week. And I've really been thinking a lot about the role AI is going to have in our education. Right now, we aren't allowed to use AI tools with our students because they're young. But I see a lot of overwhelm in my teachers and the teachers that I get a chance to interact with. And I see a lot of potential for using AI to really almost be, I think the word I heard, I was listening to another podcast from ISTE community leaders. They said your co-pilot, and really thinking about how we can use AI to work smarter versus harder, because being an educator has never been harder. And I tell the teachers at my school every day that I admire them. I was in the classroom for, 18 years, and I loved being in there. But I just give them credit. There's a lot going on in the classroom right now, and my job is to make their jobs easier. So looking at some AI and seeing how we can do that, using it also like with universal design for learning, how can we make it so that we can meet the needs of all of our students using it? That's definitely one thing that I've been really, thinking a lot about and trying to really work. I'm trying to build my capacity with this so that I can best support the teachers that I work with. Um, But I've also been thinking a lot about the fact that, our students in our younger grades can't use these tools, but we want to make sure that our students have literacy with understanding how these tools work. And, I've seen Common Sense Media just came out with some really great lessons for grades 6 through 12 on understanding AI. Like I said, I'm taking a course right now. I've learned so much about it. And I had a lot of misconceptions that that I'm sure other educators do. We just really need to understand it. And our students are going to grow up in a world where AI is going to be pervasive. It's going to be everywhere. We need to teach our students how to navigate that. And it's going to be really interesting to see at what point we start with that. Like I said, I'm seeing some 6 through 12 resources, but it builds into our digital citizenship and digital literacy. We want to make sure that our students understand how to navigate these tools, because unfortunately there are AI hallucinations, there are deep fakes. We want to make sure our students can really critically look at information and determine, is this valid or not? And also know that it's not just about writing a paper on ChatGPT, but it's about how can I use ChatGPT to be a better learner? And so I hope that it's going to make some positive changes in education. And, I'm just trying to learn as much about it as I can so that I can be a resource.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So a few years back, being a former civics teacher, I remember at the time, I guess the stress that we all had was, oh man, this fake news. Oh, this fake
Yeah.
news. It's so hard. It's so hard to teach our content. But like now, like looking back at it now, like in hindsight, I'm like, that was
It's
small
easy
potatoes.
then.
Yeah, like in comparison to like, yeah, I guess like the fake news conversation probably still takes place in those classrooms, but now it's like this much larger thing that perhaps
Yeah.
is more intimidating, more complex, and more threatening, right? If you don't
Yeah.
know how you're using it and how to engage with it. Yeah, that's
I think there's just
really
a lot of fear. And, I think about, when we first, I've been teaching for a while. When we first got smart boards, and there was fear there. And then we got Chromebooks, and there was a lot of fear there. And now we have generative AI that's doing, offering these, a lot of fear. And I think it's all about making sure we truly understand. Educators have so many things thrown at us at all times. I mean, I think about in the last couple of years with the science of reading in the elementary setting and how that's changed how literacy instruction's going on. I totally understand the overwhelm, but we have to figure out ways to leverage things so that we are less overwhelmed, because, public education is important and we need to make sure we continue to support it, but we need people to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so with that though, if I can use that as a segue to the creativity with our most young student, our young students, because I guess the concern that I've heard at least is like, oh, ChatGPT wash away creativity, right? So like, what do you say to that? How do you respond? And perhaps how are you training with that in mind?
Well, it's so funny because I actually feel like ChatGPT and Bard and all of those things have actually enhanced my creativity. I was working on an enrichment group for some of my 5th and 6th graders, and I knew I wanted it to be about passion projects. So I went into ChatGPT and I said, imagine that you're an elementary school tech coach who is working with 5th and 6th graders. You have 7 sessions, 1 hour each. And I use prompt engineering to help me to come up with essentially a syllabus for what I was going to do. And I kept just working and changing it until I got it to be what I want. Once I had done that, I was like, I need a name for it. I said, what's a good name for this group? And I mentioned my mascot. We ended up calling it the Stallion Spark Lab. I wouldn't have come up with those things on my own. It's about the human behind it, figuring out how to best use it. That's creativity. That's critical thinking. And I think that, a lot of times we don't think about it. I use ChatGPT as a brainstorming tool all the time. I don't use it to do my writing, but I use it to help me brainstorm, because my brain can only hold so much information. This has a huge data set, but I'm also aware of the fact, at least, that data set isn't totally current. So I need to check it and make sure. I'll never forget, I was writing my bio and I was like, I just want to see what ChatGPT is going to say. And it said I had written 2 books I hadn't written. So, you have to take these things with a grain of salt. But it's really helped me a lot to kind of branch out and think of things in a different way. It's like I said, it's like having an extra person or more in the room. So I actually think it enhances creativity because it takes you beyond what you could come up with on your own.
Yeah, no, that is true. And I have a coworker who kind of he's going to be on the show in a few weeks. He kind of talks about ChatGPT in the sense of like, oh man, I'll be working on something. I was, building something creative for my students, and he's like, hey, honey, can you proofread this, or can you like almost getting that feedback right from his wife.
Oh yeah.
But now I have my wife and ChatGPT.
Right.
So it kind of flipped it in my head. I'm like, oh, how different is it by getting feedback from ChatGPT than it is from another human at a certain level, right? At a certain level, and really being the controller of that vehicle, if I can use that language, right? Of that bot, of ChatGPT, to get to the places that you're trying to get to as a human.
Yeah. And I think with the, whole idea of critical thinking and, this is something that we have to teach, we have to teach. I know that when I first started working with it, I wasn't getting what I wanted. And I really spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, how am I going to engineer a prompt to get what I want? And really just looking through that, asking it for feedback if I need feedback. I just think that we need to look at it that way. And I think I was at ISTE last year? I was also at PA at CD this year. But Richard Culotta was speaking, and he's like, if we're giving assignments that kids can cheat on, then we're giving the wrong assignments. So we really need to kind of look at things differently. And I know that we're very big in assessment and education, but we need to really look at the learning. And I hope that we'll spend more time with that. And that's why when I work with my youngest learners, I'm always focusing on what can they create. I was teaching my little kindergartners about flip this week, and they were making videos showing different ways to make 5. And then they got to watch each other's videos. Well, that's not something for all of them to do that. And if it was in a classroom setting, they would have to wait for every single person to do it. And then they would all get squirmy. But by doing it on Flip, they're able to see not only the kids in their class, but they're able to see the kids in all of the kindergarten talk about making 5 and see how it's similar to theirs and how it's different than theirs. Next week, they're going to be doing at words, where they're talking about words with that at chunk. Just looking at something like that you can't do without the technology is super valuable. And, I'm trying to build those skills because and I said to them, you can have I have them use papers when they start. They color. You can put the paper in front of your face if you don't want to be in it, or I say it's Vanna White style. They don't know who that is. But really getting them to share their thoughts. We have a pretty big multilingual population at our school. We wanted to get them that opportunity to really rehearse their thoughts. It shouldn't just be paper and pencil. And so they get a chance to do that and learn that. And I'm always shocked how quickly they'll pick it up. But I'm really intentional when I show them how to do these things. I spend a lot of time with my young learners talking about icons, and we learn about what those symbols mean. And we have, signs for them. So I really try to build it in. So if I can teach the kids those tech skills, those digital literacy skills when they're, in those early grades, then by the time they get to 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, we don't need to worry about that. They've already built that. Now we can focus on the deeper learning.
Yeah. And so like you spent a decent amount of time talking about the advantages and the why and the reasons to use creativity with their students. Mm-hmm. So if you can kind of go into, because sometimes as a trainer myself, like teachers are hesitant. They're like, ooh, it's something different, or ooh, I don't know if I can get out of my comfort zone, right? So
Mhm.
could you spend time maybe talking about like a what maybe some examples of how you've really gotten your younger learners to create, and then b almost like how do you scaffold that as a teacher for yourself and for your students if this is your first time trying to really level up your creativity and getting students to create.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I found is that I've really been leading strongly this year into coaching cycles. Um, I've been where I'm a BISTE certified coach from Forward Edge, but so I've been sitting and I've been working with my teachers, um, and really deciding on what is our goal and really building that, from the ground up. One of my teachers was like, I want to learn. I have a program I really love called Wixie that our district buys. She wanted to learn how to use Wixie to engage her students with technology during math. So we sat there. I said, okay, what are your students doing this week? Well, they're learning different ways to make five. Some of our kids might be able to handle up to making 10. And this program has these things called magic stickers. And one of them's a spinner. And so you can spin and you can get a number from 1 to 5. And then they have to figure out what's the missing number to get to their 5. Well, that's a use of technology that someone might not think of. And so, the following week she was doing something, different again. So every week we've been sitting and planning and coming up with essentially a rotation that they can do with the technology where they're actively showing their knowledge. I just think that's so important. Saying to them, you can share with video, you can share with audio, you can share by drawing a picture, thinking about speech to text and text to speech, really leaning into all of that accessibility. The program that I'm talking about is one that has all of those things. It also allows you to clone images so you can use them as virtual manipulatives. And so really looking at some of that, I think is just so important, giving our kids that opportunity, because I want my students, when they start working on something, I want them to be able to share in the way that best meets their needs. And then if they've done that, maybe challenge them to now try a different way, because they've already shown me that they can do it one way. Well, showing you can do something 2 ways takes it up an additional level, because seeing 2 different ways can reach that same result. That's taking it to a higher level. And so I've really been trying to work with my teachers on that, not saying, okay, we're going to change everything, but let's pick one thing. I have one second grade teacher who's like, I want to use Desmos with my students, to engage them. My students like to talk a lot. And she was looking for activities that could get her students to interact and have conversations. Well, the Desmos polygraph was a great way for her to do that. It's essentially like playing Guess Who with math. And so she was able to, we were able to design it together, and we co-taught the lesson. I don't think anybody who's doing this should feel like they need to do it alone. Find somebody to be your learning partner. That's why I love being a coach, because I get to be someone's learning partner. I get to help them. And sometimes we'll figure something out that I wouldn't have thought of to start. I just think that, and as I'm doing that, I'm also able to model, the fact that I really believe in icons, and teach them to our students. And I'm able to model how I set things up. I use something called an EDU Rubicon, which is a rubric with icons, and really model, because a lot of times what I noticed, and I did this too when I first started, is teachers, when they use technology, they don't think about the tech. They just think about the content. And we really have to be intentional to make sure our students understand the tech, because if they don't understand the tech, they can't get to the content.
Yeah. So with that in mind, did you have like, I don't know what's the right word, but like, did you have like a, I don't know, like a game plan, especially when you start the first, because I had my own game plan in terms of training the students on the tech. Like I would take the first week of school where I wouldn't even touch content. I would
Mm-hmm.
just touch, my top 5 tools that I was using. I would start
Right.
there, teaching them, pepper in that digital citizenship, talk
Yeah.
about why we're using this tool. What's the advantage for you as students And there's a lot of buy-in with that, like explaining the pedagogy to
Oh,
them.
I do that as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
I always say to my kids, why are you doing that? How does this tool help us learn? Because I say to them, if the tool doesn't help you learn, then we shouldn't be using it.
right, right. So I'm curious what that looks like with the grade levels that you have experience with, because that's obviously different from the grades that I taught. So
Yeah.
what kind of tips or guidance do you have on training the students on the tech before you get to the content, if that's the pathway you take?
Yeah. I mean, what I find is like at the beginning when I start, I do have some classes that are part of the master schedule. I found this great website called Bingo Baker. We play icon bingo, where I explicitly teach the icons. The kids get a chance to practice finding it on their device, and we practice. I also, when every sign I make has, with every icon I use, it has a sign. So when my students say username, they hold up 7 fingers because usernames are 7 digits. When they say password, it's a lock. When we do upload and download, we move our bodies with this is picture. You know, so we make sure that I build that in. We're saying them, we're using our bodies with them. And then we're also making sure that we're constantly reinforcing that because some of my students can't read. So I want them to recognize, but I think about my child and how fast he knew McDonald's when he was growing up. I think McDonald's is one of the first words. They understand these. So if we can teach them that every time they see a microphone, what it's for, then they're going to remember that. And so I spend less time than teaching my students what to do with the tech tool. And I'll never forget, like I said, I use a program called Wixie all the time. And I was working with one of my kindergarten classes and I picked them up from the library and they're like, Miss Tannenbaum, Miss Tannenbaum. I'm like, what? What's going on? And they're like, it was so cool. We did Wixie, but it was with a pair. And they had made that connection between Wixie and Pear Deck. And I didn't teach it. In fact, they had done Pear Deck with their classroom teacher, not with me, but they had made the connection with the drawing tools in Pear Deck and the drawing tools in Wixie. And I just thought that's such a magical moment. And the tech tools are going to change. In the 25 years I've been teaching, I'm not sure there's any tech tool I started with that still exists now. But every kid knows will learn what a save disk is, and they'll know what a printer is. And so building those literacies are super important. Looking at a menu, knowing that hamburger's the menu, those are the types of things that we need to build because regardless of what tool you're using, most of those icons are pretty universal.
Yeah. And like what I'm hearing is like, it's almost like, and again, my own experience maybe, but like, I feel like when teachers that have not used technology a whole lot, or maybe they're not comfortable with it, they kind of go into it with like, oh, it's this isolated thing that you can do. But really, like what I'm hearing, the way you're describing, like the little lock, the little, like the branding and marketing of how you're building this, those aren't new strategies. They're the same strategies that have been used for a long time in elementary classrooms, but now you're just infusing it and letting it be a part of now this little layer that's on top, this tech layer that can now be used in the classroom transformatively. So again, it's not a new thing for those that are listening. It's just taking the same things that we've been doing, but now you're aiming it at the tech a little bit at your own pace.
Right. Absolutely.
For those student outcomes. Yeah. For those student outcomes. And just, again, my friend Samantha, just environmental print is so powerful. And it's also one of those things too, where I try to explain to teachers, like it can be high tech, low tech, no tech, and you can swing back and forth as you see fit, right? And where your students are at. And do you have a similar take on that? Like how are you swinging back and forth from that?
I think it really depends on what the need is. I try to offer lots of choices when I'm using the technology with my, my staff. And I like to really look at programs that have what I would consider high impact. So, I think about a program like Flip that you can use in lots of different contexts, or Wixie that you could use with lots of different ways, Book Creator. I really try to Canva. I really try to stick with programs that I feel like are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck as they're learning. I'm not going to teach a program that you can only use for one specific thing at one specific time. Every program that I talk about is versatile. It can be used with lots of ages. It can be used in lots of different settings. And a lot of them have templates already made. So it gives you a place to start. It's not like you have to create from scratch. All of us have the same goal. We want our students to be successful adults who are educated and can, synthesize information. This is not a me versus you, or, this and I don't know that. It's about all of us working together. And so to me, when I started this journey, I'm really working with the youngest learners. I had mostly taught 4th and 5th grade. I was not a little kid teacher, but I found it was a big need. I was tired of playing whack-a-mole trying to get all their little heads down. So, I had to find strategies. I ran into somebody on a podcast who had some strategies. I took her strategies, I made them my own, and now I've built on them. I want people to build on my strategies because I know it's cliche, but we're all better together. And so we have to keep doing those things. And it's not about saying, okay, we're going to put kids in front of Go Noodle, or we're going to let them just watch a YouTube video without doing anything active about it. We have to really think about what we're asking our kids to do, because we can learn so it stays, or we can learn so that it goes and then they have to learn it again the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I feel this way now, and I felt this way, when I was still in the high school classroom, but like conferences, and not just the big ones, the small ones, right? Like those regional conferences where we get information from the presenters for sure. But we also get information like meeting people, like connecting with people and sharing those ideas.
Yeah.
And it was like the attendees, right? Like the attendees learn from each other just as much as they learn from the presenters or the keynotes or like whatever the
absolutely.
case is.
Have you been to some ed camps? Because to me, ed camps haven't really come back, but ed camps were one of my favorite things before the pandemic. Have you been to one? But ed camps are essentially, you go and people put all the ideas of what they want to learn, and then they group them together, and then you have groups where people are just talking. It's not really facilitated, but you're just talking and sharing ideas. And I really miss those, because we used to have them in my area, and I learned so much there, and I met so many people there. Sometimes, like you said, the best learning happens in the hallways.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting idea. And it looks like Samantha has done a virtual ed camp.
Hey, I love ed camps, especially in person, but virtual ones are fun too.
Yeah. Mantha, I'll be bugging you about that later, because I'm curious. I've never been to one. Awesome. Yeah. So much information, Debbie, and so your knowledge is so rich and deep, right? In terms of your experiences, what you've accomplished. And so as we get towards the end of this episode here, if people want to connect with you, ask questions, get support, where's the best place for people to find you and connect with you?
Well, I would say that hold on, I'm gonna do a shameless plug. The best place is my website, but I also do have a book. I'm working on book number 2 now, but my book, Transform Techie Notes to Make Learning Sticky, was published on my birthday in 2021. And it really shares a lot of my journey and how I really approached a lot of this. But Tannenbaum Tech is really where you can find it all. I blog regularly. In addition to that, I have a mailing list where I send out newsletters every other week. I try to put out as much content as I can. And right now I'm also working on some articles for some publications. And like I said at the beginning, my goal this year is to really work on writing. I'm really going to work on authoring experiences in my sessions, authoring, working on publications. I really just want to, I want to put out information that I feel like might be missing, especially as we navigate, learning with our youngest learners in an age of, artificial intelligence, making sure they're really prepared. All of those things are kind of going to be coming together with me trying to figure out, that next book, which like I said, I'm working on. So.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the book, and don't feel bad about that, because that was going to be like the very last thing I was going to ask you about.
Okay.
So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. It's in the chat, but it's also going to be in the show notes once this episode is up in the Apple, the Amazon, all the places. But really highlighting the Amazon link, because it looks like you have 2 titles. Is that correct?
I contributed to another book. It's called Amplifying Instructional Design. I was one of 3 authors in that book. So
Okay.
I'm a contributing author, but I wrote all about engagement. And it was really a great experience. It was Becky Lim and Matt Rhodes were the ones who worked on that. They compiled it all together. And boy, did I learn a lot getting the opportunity to work in somebody else's work. And I've also contributed to Rochelle Dene Post book. I have a chapter in, I guess, 100 things all parents shouldn't stop doing when it comes out. But I just really enjoy sharing. I was really afraid when I first started blogging, and I'm really glad that I got stepped out. The more vulnerable I became and the more I shared my story, the better educator I became.
Yeah, no, that's certainly true. And I had similar anxiety, stress, I guess, when
Yeah,
I left the classroom to go work for a company that was much larger than my district, right? Like you go from, it's different training, like your own staff versus a much larger audience. But I think the largest benefit is how much I've learned as an educator, as a person, by being out there, and that
oh yeah,
vulnerability, and learning about not just yourself as an educator, but also as a person, right? Because like growing up, I
absolutely.
never would have wanted to go into like public speaking, but now
Me
that's like
too.
90% of my job now is speaking and training and educating people and supporting people. I think the support that I
Yeah,
give is like the most
I feel the
rewarding about
exact
it.
same way. And it wasn't something that, and it was kind of just something I had ideas that I wanted to start sharing. And I realized when I was doing it, it was something that I liked and I felt like I was good at. And, I feel like I said, the last 5 or 6 years have been a um, tremendous years of growth. And I mean, this past May, I fell and I broke my foot. And I was kind of, not able to do a whole lot, and really made me also think about my health and taking better care of myself. And I feel like now I'm the best version of me that I think I've been in a very, very long time.
Preach. Like that is such a big part of what we do,
Yeah,
because how challenging it is. Like we love it, but it's hard work. So like that
it
constant
is.
reminder of like taking care of yourself, like mind, body, soul. Right
Yeah,
now I'm on a health kick right now, like it's top of the year.
I
So
am too. I'm down 66 pounds since May.
awesome. Yes. So kudos to that. And that like giving you your praises on that one. Cause anytime that we can have like life changes, better ourselves, it ends up giving the people that need us the best versions of ourselves, right? And
Absolutely.
for students and family, and so yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Debbie, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing all of your expertise and your knowledge. I know that anyone listening now or in the future really going to benefit from your skill set, from your experience. Um, and my shameless plug, it's my turn, I guess. So if anybody is curious on where to find me and find this show, we are at underhatpod.com. That's the website. That's the home base to find all the things, the links, the social links, uh, Spotify, the episodes, all that fun stuff. Like I mentioned at the very top of this episode, I'm off next week from the show, but February is jam packed. I have guests lined up for March, well into April. So super excited for all of the guests that are going to be on the show and collaborate and give all of us something to learn. Thank you again. And you can also find me on the X Under the Hat Pod at
Oh,
Under
I
the Hat
hate
Pod.
saying that. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Debbie, hopefully we run into each other again. Hopefully this is not the last time we collab. Really appreciate your
Yep.
time. And I really appreciate everybody that's listening now or in the future. And as always, friends, keep your hats on, but keep your minds open. Y'all have a good night.